This is an interesting topic. Ghosts, the Banshee, spirits, fairies. Whether you believe in them or not, they're a common theme in folklore. Not just in Ireland, but in many other cultures around the world.
Now, you've all heard phrases like whinging like a banshee and the wind was howling like a banshee, and you've all heard about the image of the woman sitting on the rock combing her long hair and all of that sort of thing. And I have always believed that it's a load of old rubbish myself. I don't believe in any of these things, but then you know that if you've seen The Late Show and heard the radio programme down through the years. Anyway.
Now, when I set out to try and understand why such songs exist in the catalogue of Irish music, I knew I had to first figure out what is a ghost, right? Because it's a little bit more interesting than just your standard white sorted see-through figure. I used the word ghost, but I think it's better to use the word spirit instead. So let's start trying to understand what these things are. Spirits, banshees, fairies, and why they even mattered in Ireland for thousands of years in the first place. A stereotypical ghost is the lingering soul of a dead human. They remain in the physical world because of a sudden tragedy, a hidden crime, or unfinished business even. They usually haunt specific locations directly tied to their past lives. This makes them very different from other figures in Irish folklore. Although humans historically treated all of these entities with extreme caution due to their shared connection to the unseen otherworld. For example, a general spirit might be an elemental or a nature spirit. These entities never had a human life and are bound to specific natural features like rivers, trees, or the land itself even. Unlike the spirits of the dead, fairies, or the Aos are a completely separate ancient supernatural race. They're not dead humans. They have their own complex society, rules, and royalty. In the rural traditions, the Aos make their homes in parallel worlds, often inside large hills or ancient earth mounds, such as Ben Bulben and Mná. People describe them as tall, beautiful figures who sometimes shine with an inner light. They wear bright garments of green, blue, or red, and they often ride horses or carry swords. They can be incredibly dangerous if a human disrespects them or damages their territory. One historical folktale tells of a young man named Jamie Friel. He sees a group of fairies flying through the air. They fly to a large house in Dublin and lift a sleeping young woman from her bed. They carry her away and drop a piece of wood into the bed. The wood immediately takes the exact physical shape of the stolen woman. Another story features a young man named Tadhg O'Kane. A band of little people captures him on a dark road. They force him to carry a heavy, talking corpse on his back across the country. He must find a suitable graveyard to bury the body. At one location, he sees a magical ring of bright fire. The fire spins rapidly around the graveyard wall, and it blocks his path. On the waters of Lough Gur, the country people report seeing fairy boats racing at night. The boats hold transparent figures wearing shining clothes. The men pull the oars and a woman steers each boat. The boats move rapidly across the water, but they make absolutely no sound. The Banshee has a completely different origin and purpose.
Well, the Banshee is an omen of death, and she's supposed to cry. It's supposed to be a woman who's supposed to cry for certain families in Ireland.
What families?
Well, they're very special families. It's not any old family she cries for, sort of thing, you know. There are families who are supposed to be Irish. They're the Anglo-Norman families. The Burns, for example, she's supposed to cry for the Burns, you know.
Is she?
She is, mind you.
We're on the list.
You are.
and what other families does she cry
Well,
for?
she cries for the Mahans, the Murphys, the Nagels, the Nugents, the Kellys, you name it, a sort of thing.
She is a messenger of death. She is a specific female entity tied to ancient Irish families. She doesn't haunt locations to scare people. She appears purely as a warning omen. She wails or cries to signal that a family member is about to die. The Banshee has a very distinct physical appearance in these old traditions. She is a woman with a pale face, freckles, and eyes that have a dead look. Her eyes can sometimes be sewn with a red thread from constant weeping. Her hair is sometimes golden, yellow, white, or grey, and it hangs all the way down to the ground. She holds a comb in her hand. This comb is made of gold, silver, iron, or bone. She wears a loose white, grey, or red cloak. In Irish folklore, entities like fairies and the Banshee are profoundly important because they represent an ancient fairy faith that survived alongside Christianity, providing a vital framework to explain the mysteries of life, death, and disease. Historically, these beings originated as diminished Celtic gods, specifically the Tuatha De Danann, who retreated into underground mounds and invisible worlds after humans conquered Ireland. Similarly, the Banshee evolved from the Bough, an ancient Celtic goddess of war and death, who often appeared in the form of a royston crow to direct battles and foretell doom in a solitary spirit attached to specific families. As Christianity took hold, rural communities blended these myths with new theology, explaining fairies as fallen angels or lingering spirits of the dead. Before modern science, this belief system helped people understand sudden tragic misfortunes. If a healthy person wasted away or a crop failed, people believed that the fairies had stolen them or extracted their essence. Because these ancient beings lived in the local earthworks like lakes and forests, they sanctified the landscape and proved a family's ancestral claim to their territory, ensuring the rural population treated the physical environment with absolute caution and respect. The ancient people of Ireland believed the invisible world of the dead existed directly on the physical earth. They viewed the local geography as the actual afterlife. Ancient earthen burial mounds called sheed served as the literal homes of departed souls. The dead lived inside green hills, forests, subterranean caves, and rivers. To the rural population, the visible world and the world of the dead shared the exact same physical space. When early Irish Christianity encountered these pagan beliefs, monks and priests merged the Catholic concept of purgatory with the local geography. They taught that the underground spirit worlds were places of spiritual purification, adapting ancient Celtic rituals of descending into the earth to commune with the dead. The country people believed these souls remained trapped in the landscape, hovering around their old farms and communities. The dead formed an invisible crowd living right beside the living population, waiting for Judgment Day. Until then, they lived a parallel life inside the local hills and rivers. And it might sound familiar. These specific beliefs formed the direct historical foundation of Halloween. In the ancient Celtic calendar, this time was called Samhain, or November Eve, marking the end of summer and the great annual festival of the dead. On the night of Samhain, the invisible underground mounds opened. The dead and the fairy tribes left their hidden lives to walk freely across the physical landscape in large crowds. The rural populations followed strict traditions for this event. Families prepared their homes for the return of dead ancestors, setting out feasts of food and drinks on tables covered with fresh white cloth. However, the country people also viewed this night as a time of great danger. Mortals who walked outside in the dark risked encountering roaming spirits. The invisible hosts frequently captured living humans on November Eve, carrying them back into their underground palaces. Eventually, early Christianity adopted this pagan festival, forming the ancient Samhain rituals into the Christian holidays of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. When you look at how deeply these beliefs were woven into daily life, it becomes much easier to understand the music that survived them. The supernatural was a normal physical part of the rural landscape. People genuinely felt the unseen world was living right beside them. With that kind of everyday connection to the other world, you can really start to see why so many traditional Irish songs are built around tragic hauntings, stolen loved ones, and encounters with ghosts. These stories were a very real part of their world, and the music naturally reflected that. The Irish keening tradition is a vocal funeral ritual called the Caointe. The women who performed this service as the Mná Caointe, also known individually as Banshee, they operated as professional female mourners at wakes and burials. These keeners were typically elderly women with grey or white hair. They attended the funeral ceremonies barefoot. During the ritual, they wore their hair completely loose. They physically tore their hair while they mourned the dead. The vocal performance of the Caointe featured loud wailing and sharp cries. They sang improvised verses over the body.
Oh no, 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 oh,
These verses praised the life of the deceased person. They also voiced the deep sorrow of the surviving family members. And at this point I'm wondering, are you thinking, the Mná Caointe sort of sound like a banshee? We'll get to that in a minute. In the broader historical folk tradition, the rural population believed the continuous wailing and chanting created a protective boundary of sound. This musical barrier shielded the vulnerable human soul from evil demons in the air. The ritual song directed the soul on a safe path to the afterlife. The human practice of the kinu shares a direct structural connection with the supernatural behaviour of the banshee. The rural population describes the human funeral cry as a deliberate imitation of the banshee's wail. The banshee acts as a supernatural death messenger. The people view her as the spiritual counterpart of the human professional mourner. She appears as an old woman with white or grey hair. She wears her hair long and loose and combs it as she cries.
You getting out of the car yesterday in a car park beside another car. Nothing funny about this, it's very serious. I saw on the ground a comb. Now the odd thing is that I would never dream of picking up that comb. And that must be from my childhood, because I remembered, and I knew you were coming on tonight, and I remembered, why don't I pick that comb up? What is this thing about not picking up a comb ever? Is that part of...
Oh, it is indeed, you know, and there's a legend called the comb legend. This is something that's grown out of the man tradition in areas where she combs her hair. And people I've talked to in Dublin would say, you know, we were always told as children, don't pick up a comb, that's the banshee's comb.
Right.
Particularly if it had a broken tooth in it.
Yes.
The Mná Caointe mirrored the exact physical appearance by wearing their own hair loose and tearing it. The banshee sounds a loud, mournful cry in the dark to warn of an approaching death. The human women replicated this exact vocal sound over the physical corpse at the wake.
And what sort of a sound from your research does she make?
Well, it's a very lonesome sound. As one Cork woman said, I never heard anything so lonesome before. It's a long, lonesome cry. It's a benign sort of sound, you know. It's a sound of somebody who's interested in the family, who's sort of sorry that somebody in the family is going to die. One of the family sort of thing, you know.
But they weren't really imitating the image of the banshee. It's actually the other way around. Interestingly, this image of the banshee that we're all familiar with is essentially a more modern image. The banshee itself is ancient and derives directly from two ancient pre-Christian Celtic deities, the Sheed women, who acted as an aristocratic territorial goddess, and the Bow, goddess of war and death. Over the millennia or centuries, society in Ireland went through numerous shifts and changes. The mythological god was forgotten about in folk memory, but it wasn't really. Her role shifted from foretelling the deaths of great heroes in battle to announcing ordinary, non-violent deaths for specific local families. The rural population modelled her directly on the human professional mourners that they observed at wakes and funerals. The keening women are the Mná Caointe.
And she's not even called a banshee all over Ireland either. For example, if you live down in Wexford now, you'd know that she was called the Bow down in Wexford.
The Bow.
And in Carlow and parts of Wicklow, yeah. If you lived in Waterford, you'd talk about the Bibe. If you lived in Kilkenny, you'd probably talk about the Bohinta. In Mid-Tipperary and parts of Limerick, you'd talk about the Mná Caointe, which describes what she does. She cries, basically. And in North Mayo as well, she's called the Mná Caointe. So we're not all the same.
That's the keening thing.
That's the keening one. Yeah.
Now, funnily enough, I had always actually believed it was the other way around, because I didn't really give it that much thought. But until I read a bit from Patricia Lysagh's book, The Banshee, which is a very interesting read. I'll again explain this very badly for you, but she studied basically the image of the Banshee around Ireland and categorised the beliefs and stories on how the Banshee was perceived both visually and aurally, and it all revolves around this small old woman with long hair, and in some case she's combing her hair. In Scotland, the Banshee is perceived differently, washing in the river, the washerwoman, which is more closely related to the image of the Bow, the more ancient war goddess, who would be washing the armour and mangled limbs of warriors who are doomed for death. So it's really interesting to see how closely connected the keening is to the Banshee in this way. And as well as the differences in the Banshee between Scotland and Ireland, where the image in Scotland is the more ancient perception of the Banshee, and in Ireland it took the form of the keening women. But to summarise real quick where we are at the minute, you can hopefully now get a sense at how connected people were to the landscape, the afterlife, and the rituals around progressing to the afterlife. How the image of the Banshee and the keening women merged together over time and changes in society. It was a huge part of life in Ireland. The best way I can explain it is, think of this. Rebellion in Ireland, war, fighting, grief, loss, longing. All those emotions create songs of rebellion, songs of war, songs of grief, and songs of loss. Now, it's easy to imagine how and why there may be songs about ghosts, like take She Moved Through the Fair, for example. Where the ghost is actually forewarning the man's death rather than their real wedding day in the real world. And yes, that song is essentially a more modern song, although it was written based off an older song that was heard at a fair in Donegal. It's very hard, if not impossible, to explain to you or to give you an exact reason as to why people write songs in the first place. They just do, really. But hopefully you can see that because these ghosts, these banshees, the fairies, and all of that was such a huge part of Irish life, you can understand why they wrote the songs in the first place and why they're so popular. Also, in the modern day, you don't need to believe in ghosts to admire or respect these songs, because their themes can be so open to your own perspective that they can mean one thing to you watching this and something completely different to me. But as well as that, a person didn't have to pass away to the other world to become a ghost. During the 1840s, the Great Famine caused mass mortality around Ireland. Over 1 million people died of starvation and disease, and millions of other people left the island and travelled across the ocean to America. The rural population knew these departing travellers would likely never return to their native homes. The mass deaths and the extreme emigration left the physical landscape of Ireland emptied of a large portion of its population. The families staying behind established a specific ritual for the departing individuals called the American Wake. The community held this event on the night before an emigrant left the village. The people conducted the gathering as a traditional funeral. The neighbours gathered in the home, shared food, and performed the traditional keening ritual over the living person. The people viewed the emigrant as a person entering the afterlife. The journey to America represented a permanent physical separation in most cases. The musical tradition provided a rigid structure for the community to mourn the living people they would never see again. Traditional Irish music serves as a historical record of the people, the physical landscape, and their collective grief. The folk songs document the actual beliefs of the rural population. The lyrics preserve the history of the Aos Sí, the keening women, the famine, and the mass emigration. The ghost themes remain prevalent in the music because the songs operate as a rigid structure for the community to mourn the dead and the permanently absent, yet also remaining open for modern adaptation to provide more meaning than just the supernatural. Oh, the rabbit hole on this video was fun, I won't lie. I have Patricia Lysett to thank for that, who wrote such an absolutely amazing book about the Banshee for a start. So I took inspiration from bits throughout that book, and also a few other books. A book of fairy and folktales of the Irish peasantry by W.B. Yeats, and The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries by W.I. Evans Wentz, which I all recommend having a wee read through if you've got the time. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please, if you did, before you go, can you please like the video and comment your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear what you think about this whole entire topic. I personally knew these beliefs were strong throughout Celtic culture, but I had never really went into the details. In fairness, I really only scratched the surface as well. When it comes to people's beliefs and folklore, it's so complex and so interesting. But to me, it makes sense why such songs would exist. They were a huge part of how people understood how the world worked. Life, death, disease, We didn't have all the science and means of communication that we have today, so people just hooked on to whatever they felt made sense to them. Naturally, songs would be written about them. But anyway, before I wrap up, I want to give a huge shout out to our channel members. Here's your names up on screen now. Thanks as always for all your continued support. If you'd like to join them, hit the join button down below or check out the links in the description for more information. And to all of you who made it this far, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. And check out the shop there as well, where there is an absolute ton of Irish music inspired bits and pieces that you can buy. Have a look when you've got time. And sure, if you want any custom designs done, please give me a shout and I can work with you to get the design that you absolutely love. Finally as well, if you'd like to join the Discord server and chat with all like-minded people about Irish music and Irish history and whatever else you want, there's a link in the description there as well for you. But look, I'll let you go. I hope you all have a great day. Slán go fóill.